Hello, this is Mr. Wyrick, and I'm here to talk to you about Lesson 6.5, the fifth lesson from Chapter 6. We'll be covering rhombi and squares. Now, if you're not familiar with the term rhombi, it's kind of like when you say octopi instead of saying octopuses. Okay, so we have a rhombus. Instead of saying we have rhombuses, we have rhombi. It's just a different way of saying plural. So what we're dealing with first is the rhombus. The rhombus is a parallelogram with four congruent sides. So we're still dealing with the tilt of the parallelogram, but now we've come a little bit closer together, and all four of these sides are congruent. There's a couple of things that you need to make sure to have down in your notes. 6.15, if it's a rhombus, the diagonals are perpendicular. So not only do we have the parallelogram where the diagonals are bisecting one another, but in this case they're actually perpendicular bisectors of one another. And then 6.16, if it is a rhombus, the diagonals also bisect the angles on the edge. So we've still got the tilt, but this time those diagonals are bisecting the edges and they are perpendicular bisectors of one another. They're in the middle. So if you need a little illustration, we're going here. We've got this going through. We've got this going through. And we're here. It's perpendicular. And this one is congruent to this one. This one's congruent to this one. And these little angles here would be congruent. They are being bisected. Okay? And of course, the diagonals bisect. So I need to mark those as congruent. Okay? 6.17, 6.18, and 6.19 is the converse of these. If the diagonals are perpendicular, then it is a rhombus. On 6.18, if one diagonal bisects the angles, it's a rhombus. You don't have to prove that both of them do. As long as you've got one, you're in good shape. And then 6.19, one pair of consecutive sides congruent, it is a rhombus. So again, if we've got this parallelogram here and they say that this side is congruent to this side over here, we are definitely looking at a rhombus because we already know from the parallelogram that the opposite sides are congruent and they are parallel. Now, included in this lesson are squares, and it's 6.20. I didn't even write it up there. On 6.20, it just says, if the shape passes the test for a rhombus, in other words, one of these things is going on, and it also passes the test to be classified as a rectangle, which we went over those in the last lesson, what it takes to be a rectangle. If it's a rhombus and it's a rectangle, it's a square. Okay? All four of those angles are right angles, which makes it a rectangle, specifically from a parallelogram, and then all four of the sides are congruent. That's what makes it a rhombus. So if you remember our Venn diagrams, at the intersection of rhombus and rectangle, right here is the square. Okay? That means squares have lots and lots of different properties. So again, you might go back and look at the properties of parallelograms, look at the properties of rectangles, look at the properties of rhombuses, rhombi, because squares have all of those qualities. Okay? And if you have any other questions, you need me to go over anything, be more specific on anything, make sure to ask those questions when you come to class.